Peace be with you, church. Oh, man, I'm really excited about today's message. As we dive into this passage this morning, I just have a couple of things to say. We are in a series about, that is the right place. There we go. We're in a series about transformation. And I've heard lots of great feedback from you all about how this is impacting your life and the things that you're taking away from this idea that we're all on this journey, aren't we? We're all on the journey of allowing God's Spirit to transform us from something old into something new. And today's story is all about that. In fact, today's text is taken from John chapter 21. And it's a story about Jesus and his disciples after the resurrection. That was a great song we just sang, wasn't it, the worship team? Oh man, those harmonies were just like spot on this morning. Really good. This is a story about Jesus and his disciples after he's raised from the dead. And before we jump into this, I've talked about this before, but I grew up for a great part of my life when I was a boy in the great state of Minnesota. And Minnesota is known for something. Do you know what Minnesota is known for? Mosquitoes, that's right. And the mosquitoes love the lakes. It's called the land of 10,000 lakes. And as I was preparing for this message, I was thinking about this idea. And this may give you just a little peek into my strange little mind. If this story from John chapter 21 was written today, bless you. If this story was written today, in today's world, I imagine that the disciples would be from Minnesota. Okay? And of course, their vehicle of choice that they would ride around in would be a 12-passenger van. Do you remember 12-passenger vans? They were a thing. I had a big family. We had many of them. They would have a 12-passenger van, and they would also have a trailer hitch on that van so they could haul their boat around. But the most important thing about that van would be the bumper sticker on the back of the bumper. That it would say this: when the going gets tough, the tough go fishing. It's like a theme if you live in Minnesota. That's what you got to do. That's why I imagined it. Because this is what's happening here in this story. And as we read it, you're going to experience, well, I just want you to put yourself in the place of the disciples. We sang a song about the cross today. And we believe in the cross. We believe in what Jesus did at the cross. But the cross was a terrible thing. It was a traumatic experience to experience. And so the disciples had just experienced their rabbi, their teacher, their friend, like brutally killed in front of them. And so they had this experience of trauma. Now, there's all sorts of things to do when you experience trauma. And one of the things that is most likely that we do is we go back to something that we know. And so I want you to look about this as we read this story about the disciples, what it is that they went back to after experiencing this. Now, the passage is a little bit longer than normal. It's 19 verses, but it's a dramatic story with lots of elements in it. And as we read it together, I just invite you to be in this space. Just be fully present here. It's so interesting. We have such busy weeks. I have I'm just like you, have all these different things coming at me all week. But we get this little opportunity to just dwell in the Word a little bit together and to consider what God has for us. And so as we read through the story, pay attention to some things that catch your attention, to things that might be curious to you. And notice how the disciples react to the trauma that they've just experienced. Specifically, one disciple, okay? Pay attention to that. It'll become clear as we read the story. John 21, 1 through 19 says this: Afterward, Jesus appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee. And it happened this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, Nathanael, the sons of Zebedee, and two other disciples were together. "I'm going out to fish," Simon Peter told them. And they said, "We'll go with you." Doesn't this sound like a bunch of guys? Love it. So they went out and they got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. I've been there, done that. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore. But the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. And he called out to them, "Friends, haven't you any fish?" "No," they answered. He said, "Throw your net on the right side of the boat and you'll find some." And when they did, they were unable to haul in the net because of the large number of fish. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." As soon as Simon Peter heard him say, "It is the Lord," he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and he jumped into the water. The other disciples followed in the boat, towing the net full of fish, for they were not far from shore, about 100 yards. And when they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals, and there was fish on it and some bread. And Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish that you have just caught." So Simon Peter climbed back into the boat and dragged the net ashore. It was full of large fish, 153. But even with so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." None of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came, took the bread, and gave it to them, as he did some of the fish. This was the third time that Jesus appeared to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. And when they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," he said, "you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." Again, Jesus said, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Take care of my sheep." The third time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep." What a story. Isn't that a great story? It's a little bit, actually, it's written a little bit different than the rest of the gospel. Bible scholars think that it might have been kind of like an addendum afterwards, kind of added, after the first part was written, and to kind of tell the rest of the story, because we're leading into the book of Acts right after this. But here we have this story of Peter and Jesus and the disciples. And just a little test, do you remember what the bumper sticker said on the disciples' van? When the going gets tough? Yeah. The thing that really stood out to me was to think about what was going on in the disciples' minds. Some questions as they're still trying to process what has happened. They see Jesus crucified on the cross. Then this is the third time that they see him risen from the dead. And they might be thinking, well, what do we do next? Would you have that question? Where do we go? What are the next steps, Jesus? Personally, I can see how their experience of trauma would drive them back to something familiar, something that they know. But this is a story of transformation. This is a story where one disciple, and specifically, did you recognize who it was? It's Peter, is being transformed. And I want to focus in on the feelings of Peter at this moment. Consider the emotional state of a guy who is carrying, little fishing pun, a boatload of guilt, a boatload of shame, and a boatload of, man, I wish I could have gone back and done some things differently. There seems to be an underlying desperation in Peter's response in the passage. There's a man cooking breakfast on the shore, and it's recognized as his Lord. And Peter can't wait to greet him, can he? For some reason, he puts on more clothes to go swimming than take off clothes. I don't know. That was really curious to me. But he puts on his cloak and jumps in the water to swim 100 yards. I imagine the other disciples saying, man, Peter, we got 153 fish. You think you could help a little bit, But no, Peter is desperate to see his Lord. He's desperate to see Jesus. He wants to feel close. He shows his loyalty with eager enthusiasm. He jumps in. Perhaps Peter just wants to feel close to Jesus again. Maybe he desperately wants to feel like Jesus isn't mad at him for the mistakes that he made. Now, if you know Peter's story, maybe you remember some of the mistakes that he made in those final days. Remember when this guy named Malchus approaches him and Peter feels like he's a threat, so he takes out his sword and lops off the dude's ear? Whew, that was dramatic. Jesus was there to fix that problem for him. But then remember when he's sitting around the fire and he gets questioned 3 different times, hey, are you the one that's been with that Jesus guy? Do you know him? Are you one of his followers? Peter denies Jesus 3 times. I got to think, like, being in that situation with Peter, like, he had to be dealing with all of those emotions of, I have let Jesus down. I've failed Jesus. I really want him to like me, though. I want to feel close to Jesus. It's like Peter wants Jesus to see that, yes, I have changed, Jesus. Believe me, I have transformed. You can count on me, Jesus. Have you ever been there? Desperately wanting to feel close to a person that you've let down, that you've failed. Even if it wasn't intentional, but you know you've hurt them. You feel terrible. Maybe you feel even disappointed in yourself that you didn't show up in that moment as your best self. I don't know about you, but disappointment in myself, that's the worst. Because I'm the one who's putting the shame on myself. And I imagine that's how Peter is feeling. And so when Jesus asked him the question, do you love me? It's like Peter's chance to tell Jesus again and say, yes, Jesus, I'm your man. I won't let you down. So I like to use what I call a sanctified imagination. And I put myself in Peter's shoes, and I have to imagine all of the trauma that Peter has felt, all the shame that Peter is feeling, carrying with him as into this conversation. He has to feel some confusion. What's Jesus asking about? The text tells us that Peter actually feels hurt, that Jesus keeps asking him, do you love me? No, do you love me? Do you love me? There's something that Jesus is getting at. And this is how it relates to my week this week. You think that pastors, I always have the joke, pastors only work on Sundays, right? This is all I do. I just give a book report every week. But there's other stuff that we do too. Like in staff meeting at Wednesday, we finish up staff meeting and Becca picks up her nice leather bag and she notices that the bottom of it's kind of damp. Weird. That's weird. And so we're like, maybe there's a leak in the wall, so we're feeling around the corner where the wall is, and Mark's climbing up because he's taller, so he climbs up there and he's trying to feel in the sink. We can't figure out where the water is coming from, but the floor in the corner of the conference room is all wet. And we're like, that's weird. And so everything else gets put on hold while we're like, we got to find this leak, right? So we go around to the opposite wall and we go into the ladies' restroom. Don't worry, there was no ladies in there. So we go in there and we look and we see this nice cupboard. There's this beautiful cupboard there. We're like, wow, that's a nice thing. Maybe the leak is coming from the faucet. We're checking that. No. Then we open up the cupboard and we discover this. Yeah. So, it's like the cupboard's like all broken. It's been leaking for a long time. We didn't know it. Until Becca's, we were just thankful that it was just hot water that was on the bottom of her bag, And that, I think about this situation and I relate it to kind of what Peter is dealing with, okay? So stay with me for just a minute. Peter is trying his hardest to present a certain type of exterior to Jesus. Kind of like that first picture. Peter's like, hey, everything's cool, Jesus. I know I denied you 3 times. I know I let you down. I know I cut that guy's ear off, but everything's good, right? And Jesus, by asking him the question, do you love me, is inviting Peter to think about this idea that, Peter, maybe I want to see more than just what you're showing me. So, a theologian that I really grew to love this week, her name is Frances Taylor Gench, and she points out that in this conversation between Jesus and Peter, there's an interesting Greek thing that's happening here, and you may have heard this before. Jesus asked Peter, do you love me? He uses the Greek word agape. Do you agape me? And Peter, when he responds, he uses the word phileo, which is more like, you're my buddy, you're my brother. So if you were to like literally translate this, it would be like this. Peter, do you love me with all your heart and soul and mind, everything that you are, and you would be willing to die for me? And Peter would respond, yeah, Jesus, I'm pretty fond of you. That's be kind of a bummer of a conversation with someone that you love, right? But the significance here is that Jesus is inviting Peter into a deeper, fulfilling love, an unconditional type of love. A love that says, Peter, I know you're showing me the exterior of your cabinet right now, but if you open the door and I get to see everything that's broken inside, I'm going to love that too. Wow. And so he's asking him this. He's asking them over and over and over again. Rather than, seeing this as just Peter being like, did I pass the test or not? This is an invitation from Jesus to see and love even the broken parts that Peter doesn't want to show, even the parts he wants to hide. He's feeling all of the shame for what he did. But Jesus isn't focused on Peter's failures. He's asking Peter to be present in God's love in that moment. I love you, Peter. Do you love me? Like, I love all of you, Peter. Peter's like, yeah, but he's not quite getting it. What I believe that Jesus is inviting Peter into is actually something beyond even just what's behind the door. He's actually, if you remember, Peter is the one who will start the church in Acts. Peter's the one who's the rock, who Jesus says, you're the one who I'm going to build my church upon, my community of love. And so if I'm going to build a community that's based on agape, unconditional love, then Peter, you have to believe it for yourself first. You'll never be able to lead it unless you believe it for yourself. It's like this beautiful invitation where you remember what Jesus said in response to the love question is, feed my lambs, take care of my sheep, feed my sheep. This calling that Peter is being called into by Jesus is going to require great love. An understanding of that, not only for yourself, but for those that you're called to serve. And my friends, you are also called. God doesn't just call the pastors or, the volunteers who are here all the time. Every one of us has this calling from Jesus. Imagine yourself sitting there across from Jesus after eating breakfast and him inviting you into, I have a calling for you. But the calling is going to require something. It's going to require you receiving my love and being willing to share that. This is a call for Peter's life. Not to dwell on his failures, but to live into his own story of transformation. A transformation and calling that is only possible when Peter embraces the love of Jesus. I love this quote from N.T. Wright. He says it this way: if you're going to do any single solitary thing as a follower and servant of Jesus, this is what it's built on. Somewhere deep down inside, there is a love for Jesus. And though you've let him down enough times, he wants to find that love, to give you a chance to express it, to heal the hurts and the failures of your past, and to give you a new work to do. What Jesus communicates to Peter that day is that the motivation for Jesus, in order for Jesus to do what his calling was, to live, to die, to rise again, it was motivated by the unconditional love that he understood, the agape love of God. Jesus knew that. And he was inviting Peter into that. So this agape was the gift that God had for Peter. A story of forgiveness. For Peter's own rage, his own violence, forgiveness for his own betrayal, forgiveness for his own misunderstanding of the question, do you love me? And hey, this is good news. This is good news for Peter, and it's good news for you. Like Peter, we all have trauma in our own stories. We all have failures. We all have those places where we let each other down, and we let those down who are closest to us. And we wish that we could take those decisions back sometimes. We wish we could write a different story. And when we're faced with those darker parts of our story, often like the disciples, we return back to something that's comfortable for us. The disciples went fishing. I don't know what it is for you. When you're faced with those darker parts of your story and you're like, you want to put the cupboard over the broken water heater and just ignore it, We're held back by our guilt and shame of our past. We try to hide all those broken parts, our failures, our sins, rather than embrace the agape love of Jesus for us and for the world. The good news is this, that God's transformation story is not about perfect people. Okay, so if you're perfect, I don't know what to tell you. It's about forgiven, healed, and restored followers of Jesus. Just like Jesus invites Peter at that last moment, he says, "Follow me." So if you fit in the category of not perfect, if you fit in the category of I'm forgiven, if you're on the journey of being healed and restored, they're in a great place. You're on your journey of transformation. In her book, Encounters with Jesus, Frances Gensch writes this regarding Peter's story, and I found this so inspirational for me this week. It's clear that ministry is entrusted to forgiven sinners, less than perfect people, who undertake this work, not to earn the forgiveness and acceptance of what has already been given, but as a way of expressing gratitude for the gift of grace, as a way of living into the new resurrected life that we have received. Is that good news? That is really good news. You are entrusted with your calling, and you're going to let your own calling down. You're going to have those times where you let yourself down and you let others down. Embracing the agape love that God has for you, the unconditional love for yourself, and being willing to extend that to each other is the way. Like Peter, you've been called to follow Jesus and to live into this agape transformed life, and it's possible. Jesus doesn't stand in judgment of your past, but he offers first breakfast. That's important. Jesus offers love, Jesus offers forgiveness, and Jesus offers you a call to live into your own transformed story. Transformation happens as you embrace the unconditional agape love of God. In fact, that agape love is the fuel. It's the fuel. It's what our lives as Christians, we need that for ourselves. We need that for each other. It is the fuel by which we live and move and have our being. It's the way to see the world. It gives us this ability to treat others as we want to be treated, to treat them with forgiveness, to have the ability to be kind, to find the goodness in each other and move toward that kind of a world. This is good news. And this is the good news of Peter. This is the good news that Peter experienced when Jesus asked him, "Do you agape me?" Let's pray together. Loving God, will you continue to lead us by your Spirit into the transformation of forgiveness and love and resurrection? May we seek to extend your love, your agape love, to all those around us, and may we live in our own transformed story that you are calling into by your Spirit. And everyone said, Amen. Let's stand together, and I want to read this verse over you as a benediction today. This is from John 13:34. Jesus again is speaking to his disciples, and he says, "A new command I give you. Love one another." Agape love each other. "As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." Go in peace, church. Thank you for being here today. Happy Memorial Day.